Does the name Elias Rudolph ring a bell? Some of you might remember the name because he played football at Taft High School in Cincinnati. Well, he recently released his Final Five as he's starting to wind down his recruitment. And of course, the Ohio State Buckeyes are in this exclusive group.
You are Locked On Buckeyes, your daily podcast on the Ohio State Buckeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Buckeye fans? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Buckeyes for the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jay Stevens, also the host of the Jay Stevens Podcast. It is Tuesday, May 23rd in the year 2023, and this episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/Locked On today to get started. During today's episode, Brian Smith is with us once again. Brian is Locked On's recruiting analyst. Brian got to witness Elias Rudolph on full display over the weekend. Get Brian's thoughts and analysis after witnessing what Elias Rudolph can do on the football field over the weekend. And also get to hear Brian's insight on what it means for the Buckeyes to be in the top six of Darian Mayo. A lot of good stuff coming once again with our guy, Brian Smith. You don't want to miss it. And joining us now here on Locked On Buckeyes, once again, it's our football recruiting analyst, Mr. Brian Smith. He's back for the second week in a row. Brian, welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. There's a couple of pretty interesting prospects to talk about today with the Buckeyes.
You got that right. You got a couple guys. One of them announced his Final Five, and the other announced his top six. The first one, the Final Five, that was announced from Elias Rudolph. Now, some of you might remember this name. Those of you that are in Ohio that follow the high school trail and guys that are going to play ball in college. Elias Rudolph played football at Taft High School in Cincinnati, since moved down to Deerfield Beach, Florida, Deerfield Beach High School. And our guy Brian Smith got to see him firsthand over the weekend, so we get to hear more of what someone's thoughts after seeing this young man in a camp. What you witnessed from him over the weekend?
He is elite. I don't know how many people had seen him live. Like most of my buddies that are in the recruiting industry, we all know each other on 247, whatever. I don't know how many had seen him live because he was up north, as you mentioned, prior, and I was told, hey, this is a kid that's going to be here. This is the one we need to see, blah, blah, blah. I didn't think nothing of it because, I live in Florida. I see dudes everywhere. You throw a rock, you hit a Division I corner down here. Okay, it's ridiculous. But when he walked out onto the field, I said, oh, my God. It's just certain kids jump off the screen. He's 6'4", 215, and a legitimate size at that. I took a few photos of him standing next to some other linemen and stuff, and he's above them.
Yeah.
And it was just kind of like, okay, that kind of spells it out for you. And then you watched his first step get off.
Man.
And it's just fun, man, because he's playing against good competition, and I'm not trying to be mean, but it wasn't even competitive. He had a couple of plays where he forced interceptions. He tackled guys in the backfield multiple times. He retraced his steps. He would run it all the way across the field. Most of the ends that know they have an offer to Ohio State, etc. At high school level, let's be really honest.
Yeah.
They're lazy because they can get away with it because they were recruited on upside, not what they do now. They know that. He played as hard as anybody at the jamboree, even the kid who's trying to get his first offer. And he was by far the most gifted defensive lineman there and probably the best player there. I don't know if you see him and you don't offer him if you should be a college football coach. That's kind of how I look at it. He's that talented. And he's a top 50 kid for me, and I get to see all the great players down here in Florida. So that kind of puts it in perspective. And I have a feeling that a few networks like On3, et cetera, will be changing their perspective very soon.
You talk about that first step, and I watched some highlights before coming on with you and some clips of him play. That first step off the ball, off the line, off the snap, is on full display. Not once, not twice, not taking plays off. Every time you see him, it's first step, bam, he's gone. Even on the first play that I saw in this little highlight video, he blocked a punt First step, bam, he's gone. And I think that's one thing that coaches in college, they try to work on or create that or make it something that you can do, maybe not consistently. He's doing it right now in high school as a junior going into his senior year. And you talk about a guy who's kind of like a dude on the football field. You walk up there, you see him, you know he's something special. These coaches see the same thing. And I know Larry Johnson is chomping at the bit and potentially working with Elias Rudolph every single day because of the first step he possesses. It's lethal.
Well, it's ironic that you mentioned him. I saw him at IMG a few days before. He was out recruiting. But, I mean, look, I could coach that kid to a certain degree. I'm not saying I'm Larry Johnson, but his talent's so good. Sometimes Larry can just smile with some of the kids that he's had, like Bosa, et cetera, at defensive end. Chance Young, who's one of my favorite players on the planet. But this is a kid that once he grows into his body, he's going to weigh 250 when he's done. He's very slim. Let me be very honest here. A lot of the great DNs that you think of that played at Nebraska or Miami or Florida State, Ohio State, et cetera, coming out of high school, Justin Tuck at Notre Dame, they were all like 215-ish. And then they ended up like Tuck ended up like 270 something. These guys change their bodies as they get older. And obviously the difference between nutrition at some podunk high school like Justin Tuck was at in Alabama coming out is quite different. But this kid, he's going to weigh 250 in a year and a half, and he's still going to have that flexibility, that bend, and that first step. How does he not play somewhere? So I'm pretty excited to see where he goes. I was messaging with him a little bit, sent him a few photos and whatnot. Humble kid, too. He's not somebody just sitting there resting on his laurels. And that's probably a testament to why he plays hard, down after down after down. Like everybody I walked around, talked to, college coaches and all the scouts, everybody's like, this is insane.
Yeah.
It was just, they just started literally every play. If it was a run, went to the other side. They had no chance to block him up front. And he ran down some, but if they ran at him, they had zero chance. And this kind of just puts it in measurement. That's a respect factor. So it was a lot of fun to watch. And I think Rudolph's a kid that his limit is up to him. He can go as far as he wants to go.
Why do you think he is going to school down in Florida now versus staying in Ohio?
Just somebody told me, I asked about it, just a family thing.
Okay.
It's nothing. It's just random. It's no big deal.
I was curious because I know some kids, they decide, or some athletes in general, not just football, but I know basketball as well, they decide to go somewhere else for competition's sake their final year or final 2 years in high school versus staying where they locally are. And I wasn't sure if it was a competition thing or if it was a family thing. I saw his final five here, and we kind of touched on it a little bit. Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan, Cincinnati, Pittsburgh. Do you think Ohio State or Cincinnati have the upper hand because he is originally from Ohio in this recruiting battle that the other schools are in?
He seemed to be pretty open. I'll give you the list that he gave me for visits here in a second, but he was a kid that he was almost like stunned that he was in this situation because they did it. Their jamboree I was at Palm Beach Gardens, you would play a half. Your team would go sit down for a little bit. Another team would come on the field and they'd rotate it. And in between, I went and talked to him and got some photos and stuff. And when I asked him about the visits, he's like his eyes got big. He was just like in shock. He goes, Pittsburgh, then Michigan, Ohio State. Those are the three. And I'll visit other schools if they want me to. I'm like, brother, you're gonna have. It was comical. Like he has no idea how good he is. He has no idea. So he's just amazed at it. So I'm not sure if. Like when he did it like that, I'm like, okay, we're at the very beginning stages here. So I'm not going to get too detailed with him. I don't know if he even really cares. He just wants to be recruited and kind of meet people. Yeah. Very humble kid. I mean, you would think Ohio State would have the advantage just based on, Cincinnati's kind of their backyard. It's always been bread and butter for the Bucks. But he's a different cat. And now he's down in Florida. I can guarantee you that every school in the South and every coach that was there that I spoke to, and I spoke to a bunch of them, they are after him. So Miami offered him immediately, etc. It's going to be a battle. So the Buckeyes have him on the 23rd, Michigan on the 9th, Pittsburgh on the 2nd. I'm sure he'll have a couple others set up, but here's a little reminder to fans, and this is something I'm even having a hard time adjusting to. The NCAA recently changed their rule. My entire lifetime that I've followed recruiting since the early 90s, you've gotten 5 visits. Well, now it's unlimited. I think it's a horrible idea for obvious reasons, but I don't know how many he's going to take because his offer list is going to end up in the 40s conservatively. He's that guy. So Larry Johnson and the Buckeyes are just going to have to recruit him hard like everybody else.
If you could, Brian, we got time. Why do you think it's a horrible decision by the NCAA to allow unlimited official visits?
These coaches hate recruiting off the record because they're away from their families so much as it is. If you have unlimited visits, that means it's even more time they have to spend. And it's a reason a lot of coaches that I know, the people who've told me about, have left the college ranks and went to the NFL because they don't want to deal with it. If you add more visit weekends and more time away, that's how divorces happen, like literally. So it's a problem. And that also just leads to more opportunities for a coaching staff. Let's say Johnson in Ohio State recruits a kid. It could be this young man or somebody else for a long time. And then some school offers some money. And if it old school, they wouldn't have had another chance at a visit, like late in the process. Now you're going to see some shenanigans at the end of recruiting processes. And we have enough of that as it is. So it's going to cause some problems.
It's one thing to me to see all these coaches who are leaving college coaching maybe earlier than expected. You don't have a Bobby Bowden where you're staying at a school for a long time, or any of the Joe Paterno staying, even Woody Hayes. Like, you don't have guys staying there for as long as these other coaches did. And I wonder how this is going to impact coaching and schools saying, okay, look, like, coach likes the school, coach likes college football, likes the college aspect, but the recruiting becomes at such high demand. They're like, oh no, let me go to the NFL. Like, let me go coach these pros. Let me coach the guys that are between 21 to 35 years old, and just go ahead and do that. It's more family time. You mentioned it very well. More family time, more time with people you love. You don't want a divorce. Like, divorces are ugly. You don't want to really deal with that. So I wonder if over the next 5 years we're going to see an exit of elite coaches, either going to the TV or going to the NFL, because this recruiting stuff gets too hard on them.
I think it's already started. Part of it, Urban Meyer talked about this a couple years ago on Fox. He was talking, he was being recruited by like Texas at the time. Everybody kind of knew it. And he just kind of threw him under the bus. And I know Urban, and it wasn't really his style, but he's like, you got to report to all these board regions, this, that, and the other, and all this other stuff. They already have access to a ton of information anyway. And the more stuff that you have access to, the worse it is for a coach. And then you're adding more recruiting to it's just an overall grind. And it's one thing, like the NFL guys do a little more meetings in actual coaching, but it's at the same facility every day.
Yes.
Urban and every other coach, their biggest problem is the boosters and then on the road, because it's all like like Ohio State's got a humongous, I don't even know what their alumni is because it's like 80,000 students now. Can you imagine how many alumni places want at least an assistant, let alone Urban or whatever coach at the time is the head coach, to come speak at a function? Right. If you add more things like this, the recruiting visits, it's just going to cause problems. And for full clarity, the alleged reason that the NCAA did this was because college coaches are turning towards the portal more than high school kids. And a lot of high school kids are getting left out. That's true. But I've talked to a number of coaches, and it's the exact same answer. Because there's such a small window to win or you get canned, if you're a guy that's going to take a high school kid who's good, or you're going to take a college kid who's good but is polished and is more mature, now which one are you going to take? There is no fixing that. The NCAA completely missed the board on this because they didn't step in and set boundaries and rules. The no sit out for the transfer under any circumstance was a disaster. Until they fix that, and they're going to get sued no matter what they do at this point. So, yeah, they're going to lose more coaches. They're definitely going to lose more coaches because they're tired of being dragged around all over the country, and they put it in their contracts that they have to do these alumni functions and all this stuff anyway. Now you're adding more recruiting visits, more recruiting you got to do. Yeah, that's not going to go well.
No, it will not. What I do hope goes well for Mr. Darian Mayo is the recruitment that's going to continue going on this summer and possibly into the fall. He released his top 6 just recently, maybe a day or two ago. Maryland, Clemson, Michigan, USC, South Carolina, and Ohio State. The 6'7", I believe, 247, 250-pound defensive end out of only Maryland Good Counsel High School. This young man as well, just like Elias Rudolph, to me, he's a really good, not the same type of first step that Rudolph has, but Darian Mayo is a young man that once he gets into college, he'll start to work on his craft and be really, really good. What do you like about him, Brian, when you watch his film?
Effort. First off, that's the first thing you look at, because when he walks out on the field, he looks like a condor. His arm length is just absurd.
Yeah.
And he reminds me of a kid that, to stick with the Big Ten, he looks like a kid that's playing power forward
Correct.
for the Buckeyes or something like that. You know, he's legit. He's 6'6". He's listed at 6'7". His arms are through the roof, and his first step is still pretty good.
Yes.
And he can bend, and he really gets after it in terms of effort. Whenever you have kids like that, the college coaches are going to come. And he's also had a tremendous program and good counsel academically, socially, athletically. That's, there's a reason they've had these things going on for a long time. In the Catholic League in DC, they do a good job. Good counsel is one of them. And I'm sure Larry Johnson probably knows his way around that school without any help. So if you're going to get kids out of there, you might as well go for the best. Ohio State really started to target him pretty early. And I think that with his athleticism, with a guy like Johnson, his upside's just tremendous. He could also even slide inside as he gains weight on 3rd and long and be a pass rusher that a guard has to try to take on. That's, and one of those flexibility deals, man. Anytime you got a guy that can play multiple spots, big thumbs up.
That versatility is something that Larry Johnson and other Ohio State fans and even the coaches, definitely the coaches, love to have, because we saw a year ago, there were times that Zach Harrison bumped down inside and was really good. And we talk about long arms and length. Zach Harrison's length is insane. Same thing with Darian Mayo. The length, the arm length that they have, moving them down inside, being able to hold their weight and use their leverage down there. That's something that I think Ohio State fans have been literally chomping at the bit trying to get back to, because you have generally a D end who can be bumped down inside, is good in run or pass, primarily pass situations, but can play in run stop situations when he needs to. I like him. I like him a lot. I just wonder, what does he need to work on? You talk about like his first step is good, the effort's there. Brian, what does he need to work on that's maybe something you didn't speak of already?
Hand use.
Okay.
That's almost an automatic. If you asked me that and I was dead asleep, I would say that in my sleep. There are very few defensive linemen out of the high school ranks that consistently, there's the word that matters most. Johnson or any other D-line coach will get on their guys about it. If you miss an opportunity to hit the quarterback or make a tackle for loss, it not only hurts you on that drive, but it can change the entire conjecture of the game.
Yes.
Because it changes play calling and all that. I mean, that's why the coaches say play hard every rep. It's not just for the heck of it and talking out loud. He has the kind of physical traits that once he learns how and when to shoot his hands and to set up his moves, it will not be fair. And basically, there are only a few kids like him each year that have that length. So once again, how much does he want it? Because you can't teach what God has already provided him. So now he just has to go out there and make it happen. Whether he goes to Ohio State or not, I don't know. I like the Buckeyes' chances, but there's a lot to be said for a kid that can move around, play different spots, and has that kind of effort. I would assume that's going to translate into learning the playbook and learning technique. So, I mean, the sky is the limit. He's a top 100 prospect, and somebody's going to be very lucky to get him.
Last week, and last thing here for you, Brian, last week you mentioned how Ohio State needs to work on getting some of these elite defensive ends. We talked about Mateo Uiagalelei and the kid who went to Georgia. I forget it was a three-headed monster at defensive end in last year's class. Ohio State went 0 for 3 on trying to get just one of them. Are these two guys that fit into that elite category of defensive end that Ohio State needs to capture and get to commit to the school?
100%. These are guys that can play at Georgia or Alabama. It's as simple as that. And I know Ohio State fans want to get back to that, but right now, I may not be the most popular guy in Columbus for saying this, but they're not on the same level of those two because their defense has dropped off. It's just true. Seeing what Michigan did to them is one thing. Ohio State, that Ohio State-Georgia game, by the way, is one of the greatest games I've ever watched. That was so much fun. But they just didn't have enough ability to get pressure on the quarterback, et cetera. At some point, when you get to the playoff level, the guys on the sideline call the plays, but it's really about just a dude making a play. How often would somebody named Bosa, for instance, or Young do something in a game when Ohio State maybe wasn't playing their best, but they would change the game with just an individual physical trait that nobody else could stop? Ohio State didn't have that guy last year, in my opinion, to help Harrison. Teams get key on him. They did a good job moving him around. But Mayo, Rudolph, those kinds of guys, they're going to be able to come into play, Ohio State or anywhere. They can absolutely change Ohio State's defense.
One more thing for you, just popped into my head. Didn't have it last year. Could JT Tuimoloau be that guy this year?
Why not? A year older in college football, especially for a lineman? He's really good anyway.
Yes.
But I thought he was inconsistent. That's why I didn't mention him with Harrison.
Right.
There were plays where he just kicked the crap out of the guy in front of him. But there were times that he disappeared a little bit too. I think I need to see him better against the run, against a team like Michigan to truly measure him. And Michigan's O-line last year was great. Let's give them due. But when they play Michigan State, Penn State, and Michigan this year, they play at Notre Dame. Notre Dame's offensive tackles. That combo is the best in the country. How does he do against them? That's what he's going to be judged on, and whether or not he can go to the NFL and be a first-round pick. Does he have the skill? Absolutely. Now he just has to prove it on the field this fall.
Brian, it's always good having you on the show. If you could, let everyone know where they can follow you on Twitter, and maybe coming up next couple weekends where you might be watching high school athletes in case they want to follow you on Twitter. Get to see some pictures and videos from Brian as well.
Well, I'm on Twitter all the time at FBScout_Florida. That's at FBScout_Florida. I'm in Central Florida. I was just down in South Florida. I've seen Norland and I've seen Chaminade Madonna, Jeremiah Smith, and all those guys. There's plenty of opportunities for video. I just actually put up a couple of different things from photos with Elias. I saw him this weekend. I'm not sure where I'm going this week, but it'll be somewhere here in Central Florida for one of the spring games. It's on my list of to-do today to figure out where I'm going next. You have to miss something because so many of them are at the same time. But Ohio State's offered a lot of the kids down here. They've recruited to state really hard. So check me out. You'll find plenty of stuff.
And guys, you can follow me on Twitter at jstevens07. Send all of your emails to jstevens317@gmail.com. We're out of here on a Tuesday with our guy, Brian Smith, Locked On's recruiting analyst. Love having Brian on. Can't wait to talk to him again next week for a Tuesday here on Locked On Buckeyes. I am Jay Stevens. I'll see you next time.